So I made an N8N workflow that can scrape Google Maps and collect leads from business owners. So we can basically get their phone numbers. So if you want to call them, do SMS marketing, whatever, you can just scrape Google Maps and get all their phone numbers and enter it into a Google Sheets. Now let's run this. First, this is my Google Sheets right here. As you can see, it's empty. Let me refresh this. So yeah, it's empty. Nothing in here except the title for the columns. Now I'm going to run this and scrape about, I believe it's about 60 to 80 leads. Now let's run this. And now it's done. And I have all my leads right here. As you can see, we have 80 leads. All right here. You have their names, their website, their phone number. And all of this is from Google Maps. Now, how exactly does this stuff works? So first you want to set up your credentials. So I want to click the plus, click on credentials. Now the two credentials that you need is the SERP API and Google Sheets. Now the SERP API is very easy. You first need to go to SERP API and create an account. So type in SERP API and click on sign up. Now the annoying thing is that first you need an email and a phone number for verification. And also the sign up process is very annoying because they give you like a bunch of captcha. So literally every time you click on something, there's a captcha that pops up, which is just very annoying to deal with. But then once you sign in, then everything is easy, no problem. Now once you're in your account, then you want to click on account. And you should see a section that says API, and you want to click on that and you'll see your API key. Then you want to take your API key and you want to come over N8N. Click on SERP API. Then you just enter your key right here, click save, and you're done. Now for Google Sheets, I click on create credentials, then Sheets. I think you can pick anyone, so let's go with this one. Then you want to click on the open docs. You want to scroll down. You should see a video right here that explains how to set up your Google account. And this video is very straightforward, step by step. So you can just watch this video right here and set up your Google account and add the authentication and everything. Now, if you are doing this locally, then there is a few stuff that you may need to know. I made a video previously that explained this stuff, like how to set up N8N in Docker and the port number and all of that stuff. So if you're doing this locally and you run into issues, then you can go watch my previous videos. But yeah, this video right here explains everything on how to set up your Google account. Now, how does this work? Let's start at the beginning. Now, since this is N8N, there are many different ways you can start this workflow. Like for example, you can set it to schedule. So let's say you want to like start calling leads at like 10 a.m. You can set this to run at like 9:30, scrape all your leads. And then by the time you wake up, you brush your teeth, whatever, and get to your computer, all the leads are already there waiting for you. So that's one thing you can do. Now you can also add other triggers like an email and text message, whatever. But in our case, since this is just for testing, then we're going to add a click trigger. Now after that, we have a HTTP request. Now for this one, we actually have two requests. For the first one, you can use the SERP API. So SERP API. So you can use this official SERP API. And as you can see, you have a bunch of different requests. And you can scroll down and find maps. And if you want, you can use this one right here. The reason why I'm using HTTP is because, well, I started to use that at first. But then I realized that for the first request, you can actually use the official one. But at that point, I already had the HTTP. So I'm like, there's no point in going back and changing it. But if you want to, for the first request, you can use this one right here. But in my case, I'm going to be using the HTTP. So this is actually very simple. I know it may look complicated, but it's not. The first thing you need is the URL. Now you can get this URL from your account. So you can go to your account, scroll all the way down, see the Google Maps API, and then right here, we see this link right here. This one that says search engine Google Maps. You want to copy this link and paste it right here. And this is the URL that you're going to be reaching out to. Now after that, you want to click on predefined credentials and select your SERP API account, which you should have set up before. Then after that, you have the parameters. Now there's a bunch of different parameters that you can have, but in our case, we're only going to be using one, which is the search parameter. So when you go to Google Maps, you type a search. So for example, let's say you want like roofing in New York. So you go to Google Maps and you type roofing in New York. So that's what Q is in this case. In this case, Q is whatever you would type in the Google search. So yeah, whatever your search query is, whatever you would search for, that's what Q is. So you would, for the name, you would have Q, and then for the value, you put whatever you would search. So in this case, you want roofers in New York, and that's the lead we're going to be scraping, right? So you put roofing in New York. Now, obviously, it depends on your niche. So for example, if you want to do car detailers, it should be like car detailers in New York or car detailers in Canada, in Toronto, whatever business you're looking for, then that's what you would put right here. Now, after you run this request, then it's going to return this result over here. Now, the ones that you want to focus on is this one right here that says local results. Now, this is the actual results, the actual business information. So as you can see, the first one right here is Goldenberg Roofing in New York. And this is all the information on their Google profile, which is very important to note. This right here returns the information on their Google Maps profile. So basically, if you want like their email or something like that, then obviously you can get that because email is typically not on the Google Maps profile. So yeah, if you want that, then you'd have to go directly to their website to get it. But in this case, the information that you can get is their phone number and website. So if you want to do like cold calling or SMS or whatever, then you can get their phone number and you can get the link to their website and some other information. But yeah, this is basically information from their Google Maps profile. Now the next thing you want is the next URL, and I'm going to explain this later, but this is basically I'm going to explain why you need this later. But yeah, this is another important thing that you want. Now after that, we send our data into the split out. Now I'm going to explain why we need this after I go over the Google Sheets. Now for the Google Sheets, to set this up, you first need to select your Google account, which you should already have linked. Then you want to create a Google Docs and you want to copy the URL of the Google Docs. Then you want to paste it right here. So you want to select URL, paste the URL right here. And of course you want to select append row. As you can see, there's a bunch of different operations, but in this case, we want to append the row because we're going to be adding the data into Google Sheets. And then it will automatically pop up right here. And the name of the title right here, it will automatically pop up right here. Now to actually add the data now, how does this work? Now, there's actually an issue with N8N. Now, what happens is that whenever you return the result from this, N8N counts this entire thing as one single result. Now, the issue is that if you send the result directly to the Google Sheets, then the Google Sheets is going to see like, okay, this is one result. Now, the issue is that it's going to run one time, and when it runs one time, it's only going to append the first result to the Google Sheets, and then it's going to stop. Now, obviously that's an issue because you don't want to run, you don't want to only append one result. You want to append all the results in here. And so obviously you want this to run multiple times instead of just one time. But since N8N treats this entire thing as just one, then it's going to only run once, append the first results, and then stop. Now to solve this issue, we're going to be using a split node right here. So what the split node does is that it takes the JSON file, which is just one single file, and then it split up all the data into different parts. And so instead of sending one piece of data, it will send all the data into different parts. And so the node will say, okay, we're not just receiving one data, we're receiving multiple data. And for each data, it's going to take it and then append it to the sheet. So in our case, we have 20 results. So each result is going to get split up into its own different output. And it's going to take each output one by one and append it to the Google Sheet one by one, instead of just appending the first result and then stopping. Now what you want to do is that you want to go to your HTTP request and you want to scroll down to where you see local. So yes, right here you see local. Yes, so this right here is the result, which basically has the information for all the businesses. So as you can see, the first business right here. Then if you scroll down, you see the second one right here. So you want to take this local results right here and you want to drag it and drop it right here. And then yeah, that's basically it for this node. Then you go to the sheets. Now you want to take the data from the split node. And so as you can see, there's a bunch of different data right here. You can pick the ones that you want. But I'm guessing if you're lead scraping, you're gonna need the business name, the website, and the phone number. So in this case, we take the title, drop it right here, scroll down, take the phone number, you drop it right here, you take the website, and you drop it right here. And so this will append the business name, website, and the phone number to the Google Sheets, as you can see we have right here. Then after that, we have a code node. Now this is where things becomes annoying. Now remember earlier I said that the next URL, which is this URL right here, you're gonna need this URL. Now why you need this URL is for okay, so for example, let's say you want to scrape like 100 results or maybe 200 results. Now how will that work? Now the way SERP API works is that each request returns 20 results, no more or no less. Now obviously this is an issue, right? Because what if you want like 200 results? Obviously you can get 200 results in one request because each request only returns 20 results. And this is where this link comes in. Now SERP API, the URL request, it has a bunch of parameters, but one of the one parameter that's very important is the start parameter. Now how does this work? It's basically offset. So for example, let's say you're scraping and you want to skip like the first 5 results and only start scraping at number 6, then you can add the start to equal 5. So it will say, okay, start is equal to 5, so we're going to skip the first 5 results and start scraping at number 6. Now this is very useful for if you want to scrape multiple results. So what happened is that in this case we're making the first request. Now the first request starts at number 0, and as I said, each request scrapes 20 results. So the first request, it go to Google Maps, scrape the first 20 businesses, and then it returns this URL. Now this URL has a start value of 20. Now what this says is that, okay, we've already scraped the first 20 results. So if you want to start scraping again, you want to start at 20, you want to start at 21, right? Because we already have the first 20 results. And each time you make a request, you're going to get back this link right here, which says, okay, you just scrape a certain amount of leads. So if you want to start scraping again, this is where you need to start scraping. So again, in our case, we just did 0 to 20. So if you want to start scraping again, we already have the first 20 results. So obviously we don't need 20 results again. We only need the next 20 results. So this right here says, okay, we did the first 0 to 20. So now if you want to do again, we start at number 20, going up all the way to 40 and so on. Now this code node, it takes the URL, the next URL for the next scraping. So next time we make a request to scrape again, we're going to be using the next URL. We go to the HTTP request and we scroll down right here. So we take the next URL and drop it right here. So we can send this URL to make another request. So drag and drop it right here. Oh, and by the way, the code node, all it does is that it takes the data and adds it to a JSON and output it. So basically it just adds the data to a JSON file and output it as a JSON so we can send it to the next node. That's all we do right here. So it returns JSON and the URL. Now right here we have a merge node. Now I'm going to explain what the purpose of this node is later. But for now, the data passes through the merge and it goes to the second HTTP request. Now for the second request, again, we already got the first 0 to 20 results. So now we need the next 20 results after that. Now right after we make the request, you see we get back the information with all the business information for the next 20 business. And over here we see we get another next URL. So this is going to be the next scrape. Let's see. Okay, so we just scraped number 20. So the current URL that we just scraped is number 20. And the next URL that we're going to scrape is number 40. Because remember, as I explained before, this only returns 20 results. So in this case, we just scrape number 20 to number 40. So if you want to start scraping again, we don't want to start scraping at 20. We want to start scraping at 40 to 60 because we just did 20 to 40. This is going to be the next request that we're going to be sending. And this is the current request. And it also gives you the previous requests. And this is the information for the current request. And everything is the same as before. You add the split, append the new data to the sheets. Basically the same thing as before. You split the data and append it to the Google Sheets. You split data, multiple data, add all of it to the Google Sheet one by one. Then take the code node and you take the URL. Now in this case, we're going to be taking the next URL from the second HTTP request. So as you can see, we have two HTTP requests. So we have the first request over here, this is the initial request. and this is the second request. Now in this second loop right here, we need the we need the URL, the next URL from the second HTTP request right here. So you scroll all the way down. And you see we have the next URL right here. Take it, drop it over here. Now you'll notice that we also have a start variable. Now this is going to be used for the if node, which I'm going to explain a little bit later. But for this one, you want to get it from the HTTP request, but it's all the way up here. So go to the search parameters and you see start, you drag it and drop it right here, which again we're going to need this for the if node, which I'm going to explain later. So yeah, right here we have the if node. Now the if node is basically what we use for the loop. Okay, so the way this works is that this is just basically one giant loop. So remember, the request, each request returns only 20 results. So obviously if we want to get like 100 results, we need to make like multiple requests. So each time we create one request, you need to make another request, another request, another request until we get the amount of results that we want. Now obviously to do this, we need to create a loop. Now the annoying thing is that for some reason N8N, they seem to not have a way to create loops. At least none that I could find. Like I was searching and I couldn't find a way to do it. Like there's no way to just create a simple for loop. So because of that, you have to find like a different like workaround method, which actually took me like a few hours to figure it out because it's not that simple. There's a bunch of different issues with the way data works and so on. Like I was trying to add like multiple data into one node and all of that stuff, and it just wasn't working. But in the end, I ended up coming up with this solution right here, which uses a if node. Now, how does this work? Now, first, as you can see right here, we take the next URL. So this is going to be our next request, and we'll take the start. Now, the start is basically we're going to use it as a condition. Now, first, I tried to use like a variable, but again, I was having an issue because N8N is stateless, which means that it's very hard or basically impossible to maintain the state of a variable. So if you want to have like a variable that is used as a counter, then it's going to be very hard to maintain the state of that variable throughout the workflow. So I ended up just deleting that variable and using the start value from the HTTP request instead. And so we basically take this variable and we add it to our if node. Now, first of all, why do we even need a code node? Because obviously we could take like the data from here and add it over here. But the issue that I ran into is that the way the nodes works is kind of different. So with the if node, it can only take data from the node that's feeding directly into it. In our case, we have like the Google Sheets node before. So if I was to try to drag this into this, then basically the previous node to the if node would be the Google Sheets node. Now that's an issue because we want the data from the HTTP request. So if you were to like drag this into the if node, it's not going to work because of how the scoping works. So since HTTP request is not the node that's directly before the if node, then you can't just drag and drop the data into it. Like the if node can only get the data from the previous node. Now the code node is different because it seems that it has a global scope. Now what that means is that it can basically get data from anywhere, which is exactly what we did. So even though the previous node to the code node is the Google Sheets node, we were basically able to drag the data from the HTTP request from all the way down here and put it into the code node. So this has a global scope. And then we basically package the data into a JSON format and send it over to the if node. Now, the condition that we use for the if node is the start variable. So for example, the main reason why we need the if node is basically for a stopping condition, because obviously if you have a loop and no stop condition, then this is going to keep on running infinitely and doesn't stop. Now, if you want to scrape every single business on Google Maps, then I mean, you could do that if you want. And in that case, you don't even need the loop. You could just use like the pagination, because you scroll down here and you click on option. It's like this pagination option, which allows you to basically just scrape infinitely. So if you want to scrape every single business on Google Maps, then yeah, you can use this option right here. But in our case, we don't want to scrape every single business here. We want to scrape like a limited amount. So let's say like 100, 200, maybe 500, but not every single business. So in that case, you're going to use like a loop, and that's basically the whole point of this entire thing. So from the code node, we take the start and we edit right here, and we say, okay, as long as the start value is less than 60, then we're going to keep on running this loop. But then once the value is greater than 60, then the loop is going to stop. Now, once the value is greater than 60, then at that point, you script about 80 leads. So at that point, we have like 80 leads, then we're going to stop. Now, obviously, the stopping point depends on how much leads you want. So obviously, if you need like, maybe like 200 leads, then you can say, okay, once the start is, as long as the start is less than 200, then we're going to keep running the loop. But then once we get to 200, then we can just stop the loop. So yeah, this is going to be depending on how many leads that you want. Now, again, if the value is less than 60, then we're going to keep on running, and we're going to send the next URL to make another request. Because again, the next URL is going to be basically the next request to request the next batch of results. So we take the next URL and we send it around to make another HTTP request. Now this is where the merge node comes in, and this is an issue that I ran into. So I was trying to add like multiple inputs into the HTTP request, but it turns out that there's also another issue with N8N. So basically, if you try to add like multiple data into one node, then what happens is that N8N basically treats it as one piece of data. Now remember the issue I had earlier with the Google Sheets where I said that if one piece of data comes in, then it's going to run like the first result and then completely forget the other results. Then the same thing was happening here. So if you add like two inputs, right? So if you add like input from here and then the input from here, then it's going to treat it as one result. And then it's going to run the first input, which is this one right here, and completely ignore the input from this one right here. So basically, we will, whenever this result run, and get the next URL from this results, and then send that URL through here and loop back around. This URL will get ignored and it will only run this URL at the top. So to fix this issue, I ended up using the merge node. The setup that I have right here, what it does is that I selected like the combine, position, and the two inputs, and what it does is that if it's receiving data from here but no data from here, then it will output the data from here and send it to the HTTP request. However, if it receives data from here, then it will basically discard this data and only output this data. So this works because for the first run when you make a first request, this is going to have data, but this is going to be empty. So in that case, we only want the data from this node to pass through. Now, once we run the data from here, then obviously in this case, we get a new URL and we don't want the URL from here. We only want the URL from here. So what this node does is that it's like, okay, we have a new URL here and one up here, but guess what? We're going to discard this URL right here and only output this URL down here. So the new URL, once it comes in, it basically goes into the merge node and it outputs the URL for the second input, which is the new URL right here. Then you output that to make this the next request, and then the loop basically continues. So basically each time a new URL comes in, it goes down the line. It's less than 60, runs again, less than 60, runs again, and it keeps on running until once the start is greater than 60, like okay, it's greater than 60, time to stop. So basically this loop, it keeps on running and running until you scrape all the leads that you need. And then once that is done, then the loop just stops and the workflow ends. And just like that, all your data is right here. All the phone number, website, and everything. Now, obviously, since this is N8N, you can also do other stuff. So at this point, you could set up like a AI agent that craft like specialized messages, send and like you can send the message to each number in the sheet. You can set up AI agent to like call each of the leads. You can set up an AI agent to call each of these leads. There's a bunch of stuff you can do, and I'm actually going to build a workflow that uses an AI agent to basically like contact these leads and so on. So there's a bunch of stuff you can do, which is the cool part about N8N. So yeah, my next build is probably going to be to add an AI to this stuff that can like, maybe like send an SMS to these leads, like specialized messages, call them and so on. So yeah, if you want to see that, then definitely subscribe.